Before it gets too late, I think I should do a video on some obsidian. I've got two pieces here. One is more refined than the other. I think I might have, well, let's see, I did this at the Knapping. I bifaced it at the Knapping, this last one I went to. I'm not sure if I caught it on video or not. I don't think I'm going to do this one on this video. I think I'm going to tackle this piece here. This one is relatively simple. This one is more of a mystery to me, so I'm going to do this. I usually tackle a more difficult one. Okay, so that's what I'll do. I'm going to knap both of those eventually for this upcoming auction, but I'll do this one on video. At least to the biface stage. We'll see how it goes. If it's not too difficult, I'll try to refine it and maybe even do a complete point. We'll see. It's getting kind of late, so I might not do a rock to point. We'll see how it goes. I am going to narrate. This will be an instructional type video. I was thinking of doing a no talk video for this one, but no, I think I'll discuss what I do. Yeah. Okay, so it's relatively thick still. There's lots of room. Let's see. Although there's not much room here for a width, I might still be able to preserve the width. I mean, preserve the length, even though there's not much width at the tip. It's 8 5/8. I'm going to try to preserve as much length as possible. Okay. This is a solid copper head bopper. The heaviest one I have is like 13.8 ounces, almost 14 ounces. This one I think is 8 ounces. I can't see the writing anymore on it. I've shown the weight in a different video. Yeah, I can't see. Anyway, I can weigh it later. I don't have my scale with me right now. If you really want to know the weights, I can do that, but I'll have to find a scale to weigh them. You can just send me a message or send me a comment. You can send me a message by email that you would like the weights and all that, or put it in the comments and I'll try to answer the question. Okay. Let's see. My nose is a bit stuffy, so I might be sniffling. Something's bugging my allergies. Anyway, my normal approach is to thin down the ends first. I do want to tackle the tip here to make sure that it doesn't get too narrow. I did take off some length. I'd rather take it off now and use the dull areas to thin it. You know, I'll dull the tip and, you know, create an edge that I can run flakes from. I'd rather do that than try to preserve that long narrow tip. You know, I did lose some length there, but I'd rather do that than try to make the tip really long and narrow. So it's now 8 inches. Okay, so I made subconsciously the decision to just take that tip down. I wasn't really thinking about it too much. That's just my normal reaction. Okay, not my normal. That's just my subconscious reaction. Okay. So now I'm going to zigzag this edge. The ends are kind of thin. I mean, relatively speaking. I probably should focus more on thinning the ends, but I want to get rid of that square edge just to see how much width I have after that. Again, it's not a logical decision, it's just going by feel. If going by feel doesn't give me good results, I'll think about it a little bit more. Yeah. I try to pace myself so I don't think about it too much. There's two reasons, you know. One, just it causes mental fatigue, and number two, it just, for some reason, if I think too much, it messes up the flint knapping. So it becomes counterproductive. Instead of taking flakes off that are nice, if I think about it too much, I don't take off nice flakes, so to speak. I know it doesn't sound right, but that's just the way it works for me. Thinking about it too much messes things up. All right. So I'm just going to trim where I think it needs it, and it's safe. This is an obsidian, so I got to worry about breaking it in half. Obsidian is very susceptible to snapping in half. Now, as I'm knapping it, I'll get used to it. So I'll kind of know how far to push it. Without breaking it. And that helps when it comes to thinning. You got to know what the limits are, or at least get a good feel for the limits, so that you can push it and thin it down. You're going to need to take risks when thinning, but you can limit the bad luck by being careful. Yeah. Sometimes you can't avoid the bad luck, but you can minimize it. Someone commented that the good luck is when skill meets opportunity. That's not a bad expression, but I prefer the expression good luck is when something could go terribly wrong but doesn't. I think that's a better definition of good luck, especially in flint knapping. So something that could go terribly wrong is snapping this in half. If it doesn't, to me, that's good luck. And of course, you could increase the chances of that by being more careful, but you never know. All your precautions might not help. And, you know, thinking a lot might not help either. Okay, so what am I doing? This is just basic stuff. Now, even basic stuff can be very difficult for beginners. You're just going to have to do a lot of flake removals to get the basics down. I mean, I can show you what I do, but you're going to have to actually do it yourself to get your own skill set. I suppose you can increase your skill by watching others but I find that to be an unreliable way to do it. You might think you're gaining some skill just by watching some success, but in my experience, it's not a very good way to approach. Not a good way to approach it in flint knapping. And other skills, I suppose that'll work. You know, when you figure out that, or when you see that something can be done a certain way, it doesn't require any risk. It does increase your skill set, because now you know that it can be done. And, you know, you can do it easily without having to practice very much. Kind of like math. You know, once you know how to do division, as an example, by seeing it, it increases your skill in math without having to practice it. But this, in flint knapping, you need to practice as well as see it. I hit right here, but it shattered in this direction. It doesn't always go as planned. But it's okay. It's okay. I'm going to lose some length again. So now I am trying to preserve length, okay? But I'm not overly concerned with it. So now it's 7 3/8. So I lost another 5/8. Yeah, it seems like a lot. Yes, I know. If it's disappointing, I understand. But I'm not going to think about it too much. I'm just going to go what feels like I can accomplish. Okay. And again, I lost some length. I'm going to be going for symmetry here. That tip was just too far that way. I've got to line it up with the, I got to line it up with this edge here. If it's going too curved, I got to take some of that off, no matter what. And I got to take some of this off here. To preserve most of the length, the easiest is to do a double pointed biface. Probably what I'll do with this one. Yeah. Even doing a double pointed one, still, I lost a lot of length. Now, here is the problem. I could not make a double pointed. Yeah. It's possible to make. It's not possible to make another shape without losing a lot more length. Unless I make a curved blade. But I did not set out to make a curved blade to begin with. I could have thought about it a little bit more and made a curved blade, and then that would preserve the length. So working with the material and going with the flow of the material, it could have been longer. But I'm thinking of a symmetrical blade and not a curved one to begin with. Yeah. That was my initial thought process when I started, to make a symmetrical blade and not a curved one. Maximize it while making a symmetrical blade. Okay. Yeah, I could have probably made a longer piece with a curved blade. All right. Anyways, we'll just continue. I could still make a curved blade, but I don't want to make a curved blade. Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah. Why? I don't know. I don't feel like making a curved blade. I want to make a symmetrical blade. Yeah. Alright, so with that in mind, I made my final decision. That's my final answer. I'm going to make a symmetrical double pointed blade. Yeah. So here we go. And go thin. As thin as I can. And with nice flakes. So it's probably going to end up quite narrow compared to the initial width. Because I don't want a lot of nasty stuff in the middle. If I can't run flakes across the across the middle, it's not going to thin down very well. As it gets thin, we don't know how it's going to act. Not yet, anyway. I'm just going to assume that it's not going to act well. That way, I'll not be all upset that it gets real narrow. Because I'm assuming it's not going to cooperate. How's that? Now, is there a way to be successful without assuming the worst? I think so. But my chances of success increase if I assume the worst. Yeah. I guess I realize that I'm not that optimistic when it comes to knapping. Alright, so I am going to be careful when removing these flakes. And I do want large flakes and not too many crud flakes, just so I can make other things in the future. Although I do have lots of obsidian flakes, there's always room for more. I have a lot of usable obsidian flakes, but I like to have some usable flakes from everything that I reduce. Yeah, I'd like to get into that habit. Okay. But you don't have to do that. Okay. So what's 18 minutes? Yeah, this is the biface. Now comes the preliminary thinning. That's why I'm kind of cleaning up. The mindset is going to change. My mindset is going to change. Now this is somewhat translucent material. Yeah. It does have some banding in it, so it might look kind of cool once I get it finished. Yikes, I need 2 gloves. It's just so hot that I don't feel like wearing 2 gloves, but there's some sharp edges on this I gotta be careful, and some sharp terminations on these flakes. Some of these step fractures are very sharp. I think I jabbed myself with a, yeah, right there was a remnant. Let's see. Let me try to clean up a little bit more. It's important at this stage, this next stage, that we're able to see everything that's going on. Okay, without interference from the background. Since this is going to be an instructional video, I like to clean up between stages. It helps me to see Also is a little pause in the mentality, which helps to get ready for the next stage. All that good stuff. Alright, so what to do from here? Well, I have to decide whether I'm going to make flakes with indirect percussion or direct percussion. I can do either at this stage. Especially with Obsidian, I have that choice because it's easy to reduce it, even when it's this thick, with indirect percussion. Relatively easy. Yeah. Yeah, let's try some indirect percussion. If it feels like it's taking too long, I'll switch back to direct percussion. You know, if it takes too long, or if I'm not getting usable flakes, like the kind I like, well, we can switch it back to direct percussion to get some usable flakes. See, the indirect percussion is going to remove smaller flakes on average. With the setup that I have with this 3/8 inch rod. If I had a larger diameter rod, I could remove larger flakes on average. I can remove large flakes with the 3/8 diameter rod. It's just a little more tricky. I have to abrade the edge quite a bit and hit harder. Think about it a little bit more. Okay. Yeah, metal with indirect percussion puts a lot of stress on the point of impact, so we got to abrade quite a bit to make these striking areas strong enough to handle that metal. Now you can use antler or bone or aluminum or a soft hammerstone or something. Doesn't require as much abrading in most cases. I don't know about this particular type of obsidian because I'm not doing a direct comparison. You know, I don't have an antler billet or antler indirect percussion rod to compare the two. But just from experience, on average, you don't have to abrade as much with a softer tool. Okay. Yeah, the metal indirect percussion flaker that has a relatively small diameter puts a lot of stress on the edge, and it crushes it easily. What I did there is I just knocked off something that I couldn't flake from, and it's almost the same thing here. See, that's a weird edge. I gotta remove that first. Let's see if I can do anything else. Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do much there. So let's switch to this spot. Yeah. And I'm just making it smoother overall, less lumpy on the surface. The angle changes quite a bit, but in a subtle way. The angles do change, but you can barely see the changes. I'm not always striking at the same angle every time, because there's different circumstances. Sometimes I want a long flake, sometimes I don't. I don't want to try to go too far with a long flake sometimes, either because I think the termination is going to step. Like if I try a long flake here into a concavity, that's going to cause a step fracture. I don't want a long flake, as an example. So it's a different angle to produce a shorter flake, but the difference is very minimal. You probably won't be able to see the difference on video. But I am making a conscious effort to not produce step fractures in the middle. We'll see how far I can go. See how wide I can keep it. If it starts to dive too much, or if it's not going well, I'll have to make it more narrow. But if I'm getting too many step fractures in the middle, I'll just make it more narrow. Yeah, for the time being, until I can get better at knapping obsidian in general. Over time, I can make wider and wider obsidian points. Up to a point. You can't work miracles. You still need a convexity. And if it's really wide and it needs a lot of convexity, it's going to look really thick from the side. Yeah. And not everybody likes that. So we'll see. I think I can get this fairly thin. It looks like these flakes can come off pretty flat, relatively speaking, without diving. Now there's a dive right there. That's not a good sign. How do you prevent diving? Well, you can't. Okay, it's going to do that because flakes like the curved surface. And if it doesn't have a curved surface, it'll still want to be curved. It depends on the material. Some material you can knap flatter than others. Sometimes you can hit it in such a way that it creates shear forces, which allows you to do a flatter flake. But I haven't mastered that technique, so I'm not focused on that. I'm not focused on how to produce the shear forces necessary to produce flat flakes regardless of the material. If it's even possible. Sometimes, I don't know. It seems like it's theoretically possible to create flatter flakes just by technique. And yeah, it seems possible because you can use shear forces. But in practice, I don't know. May have to develop another tool set. Trying to trim without causing those step fractures. Alright. Yeah, this is not I'm either missing or misjudging opportunities, or this is not cooperating, or both. The tool seems to be well ground. The edges seem to be abraded enough. Maybe I'm not judging the convexity very well, but that's my mistake there. Causes me to lose more length. So yeah, you gotta limit mistakes. Okay. Limiting mistakes is part of preserving the length. The reason why I had to lose length in this case is because that scooped it out right there. It was just bad overall flaking. Yeah, I might be able to damage control that. Get that out of there easily. Hopefully. Relatively easily. Yeah, that was pretty good. But yeah, I consider good luck to be something that could go terribly wrong but doesn't. That could have gone terribly wrong. I could have made that whole mess worse. But I didn't, so I got lucky. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going into the details of how I'm doing this because I don't know exactly how I'm doing this. I know that sounds weird. I'm just trying to make it smoother. My strategy is just a double pointed blade that's thin. That's my overall goal. And the strategy is in line with the goal. I don't want to get too many flakes in here either. I'd like to do a few, or as few as possible, flakes, so that the pattern looks like bold flaking. So there's some there's goals that are together, you know, a double pointed blade, big bold flakes if possible, and as thin as possible. Also, if I can get some usable flakes, that's a usable flake, during this reduction stage, that would be nice too. Yeah, these are mostly crud flakes. Too curved or too thin or too small. That's what I call crud flakes. Let's see, 32 minutes. I think I've achieved the preliminary thinning, and I left it thick there on purpose, okay? So the next stage is the secondary thinning and overall shaping. I'm going to take off a lot of this here and a lot of this here, but I'm leaving it on here just so I can have the option of running flakes primarily from these areas. That will reduce the width. If I just focus on running flakes from these areas that need to be removed, that's one strategy. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that's what I'm trying to do. When I leave something on, I'm thinking maybe I can run a lot of flakes from that area, since I got to remove that anyway. Removing flakes, you know, takes its toll on the edge. I don't want to take a toll on this edge on this side. I need to preserve this side in order to keep symmetry. I'm going to have to reduce that side mostly. Okay. Take a bunch off of this. So I might as well use that to run flakes. And I'm going to have to take some off of here to be symmetrical with that side. See what I'm saying? Okay. All right. I'll continue on the next segment.